Listen, everyone keeps getting this wrong. Inflation is not rising prices. That's the story they feed you to keep you confused and complacent. It's not supply chain disruptions. It's not corporate greed. It's not Putin's war or the pandemic. Those are just convenient scapegoats they trot out every time. The truth is simple and brutal. Inflation is the deliberate devaluation of your money through excessive printing by the government and the central bank. That's the whole thing. Nothing else. When the state spends way more than it takes in through taxes, and it covers the difference by creating new money out of nothing, every dollar you already have buys less. Prices don't go up on their own. Your money just shrinks in value. And they lie about this on purpose. Because if you really understood inflation for what it is, you'd see it's not some mysterious force acting on the economy. It's something the government actively does to you. It's a stealth tax, a massive transfer of wealth from your pocket straight into theirs. Today, I'm not going to throw some fluffy 3-4% official number at you that they parade on TV. I'm going to show you real inflation, the kind that obliterates entire countries, evaporates life savings, and flips ordinary families' lives upside down in under 2 years. We're going deep on 5 historical case studies that prove this happens the exact same way every single time. Weimar Germany in 1923, Zimbabwe in 2008, the United States in the 1970s, Argentina from the mid-1940s all the way to right now, and Venezuela from 2016 to 2020. Then I'll bring it home and walk you through exactly how this same weapon is quietly destroying your finances in America right now in 2026, using real numbers from the real household budgets. Because this isn't just some abstract economic indicator, it's a calculated policy. It's theft disguised as inevitability. And every single time, the pattern is identical. Government overspends massively, prints money to plug the hole, currency collapses. They blame anyone but themselves. By the time people wake up, their savings are dust. Their wages buy half what they used to. And they're running twice as fast just to fall behind. This isn't financial advice. This is documented history. And history doesn't repeat exactly, but man, it sure does rhyme. And the rhyme playing in America today is terrifyingly familiar. Let's start with the one everybody thinks they know, but almost nobody truly understands: Weimar Germany, 1923. After losing World War I, Germany was crushed with impossible reparations. 132 billion gold marks, roughly equivalent to over $500 billion in today's money. Their economy was already in ruins from the war. Factories destroyed, workforce decimated, production down over 40%. They couldn't raise taxes on a broken population without sparking total revolt. So what did? They fired up the printing presses. The Reichsbank started churning out marks like confetti to pay the Allies, keep the government running, and pay workers. At first, it felt like it was working. Bills got paid, paychecks went out, but then prices began creeping up. 1920, about 10% inflation. 1921, around 40%. People grumbled, but life went on. Then 1922 hit, and it exploded. Prices doubled, then doubled again. By early 1923, they were rising 20% a month. By midsummer, 20% a week. October, 20% a day. November, prices doubling every 3.7 days. Picture this in the daily life of a normal German factory worker. In 1918, before it all went insane, a loaf of bread cost about 0.63 marks. A skilled worker earned roughly 1,000 marks a month. Bread was no problem. Fast forward to late 1923. That same loaf cost over 200 billion marks. If you got paid at the start of the month, your entire salary couldn't buy one loaf by the end. People were paid twice a day, sometimes more. You'd get your lunch hour paycheck, sprint to the shops, and frantically buy anything you could before the prices changed again, which they did multiple times a day. Restaurants would cross out menu prices during your meal and rewrite them higher. People lugged wheelbarrows, suitcases, wagons full of cash just to buy groceries, not because they were wealthy, but because it took that much paper to equal a few dollars worth of food. The currency became so worthless that people used stacks of bills as wallpaper. It was cheaper than actual wallpaper. Kids built forts out of billion-mark notes. Families burned cash in stoves because money was literally cheaper than firewood. Now let's talk about who got destroyed. Savers. Absolutely annihilated. If you'd spent decades building a nest egg, say 50,000 marks in the bank in 1919, enough for a comfortable retirement, by 1923, it wouldn't buy a cup of coffee. Lifetime savings, gone. Pensioners and anyone on fixed income. Many starved. The government couldn't or wouldn't adjust pensions fast enough. Elderly people who'd worked their whole lives got monthly checks that bought 1 or 2 meals, if that. Thousands died of malnutrition. Wage earners fell further behind every single day. Even when wages were adjusted, they always lagged prices. You worked the same hours but fed your family less each month. Who actually benefited? Debtors, especially the biggest debtor of all, the government. Borrow money for a house in 1919. By 1923, you could pay off the entire mortgage with a couple days' wages. Debt vanished. That's why governments secretly love inflation. It's how they erase their own massive borrowing by making the money worthless. By the end, one US dollar bought 4.2 trillion German marks. The currency was dead. They introduced the Rentenmark, backed by land, at 1 trillion old marks to one new. Total reset. But the middle class had been wiped out. Trust in institutions shattered. And less than a decade later, a desperate, furious population turned to Adolf Hitler. Hyperinflation didn't just wreck the economy, it broke the entire society. And it all started because the government chose to print instead of live within its means. Fast forward to a much more modern example, Zimbabwe, peaking in 2008. Because this isn't some ancient fluke. It happens again and again when leaders ignore reality. Zimbabwe used to be Rhodesia, the breadbasket of southern Africa, exporting food, tobacco, minerals, self-sufficient and prosperous. Then in 2000, Robert Mugabe started seizing productive white-owned farms and handing them to loyalists who had zero farming experience. Production collapsed overnight. Exports turned to imports. Tax revenue dried up. But Mugabe didn't cut spending. He ramped it up. Wars in the Congo, bloated government payrolls, military bribes to stay in power. When the treasury ran dry, he forced the Reserve Bank to print. Inflation started manageable. 30% in 2000, 100% in 2001. Then it went berserk, 350% in 2004, 100% in 2006, 66,000% in 2007, and in 2008 it hit an unthinkable 89.76 trillion percent. That's 700,000,000,000,000,000,000,000%. Prices doubling every 24.7 hours. A loaf of bread that cost 200,000 Zimbabwe dollars in early 2007 cost 1.6 million in January 2008, 1.6 billion by June, and 35 trillion by November. They printed $100 trillion notes, the highest denomination ever. When issued, it bought maybe 3 eggs. A week later, nothing. People abandoned the currency. Shops only took US dollars, South African rand, or a straight barter. Workers demanded daily or twice daily pay and ran straight to buy food. ATMs couldn't keep up. The daily limit wasn't enough for bus fare. Unemployment hit 94%, not because there were no jobs, but because working was pointless when your pay evaporated before you got home. Savers, obliterated. A middle-class bank account in 2000 was worth 0 by 2009. Pensioners starved or relied on family. And in a final kick, the government seized foreign currency bank accounts and converted them at the fake official rate, stealing billions legally. By 2009, Zimbabwe ditched their own currency entirely and dollarized. They literally killed their money. An entire nation's wealth, gone. And it accelerated from high inflation to total collapse in under 2 years once the tipping point hit. You don't even need those insane sextillion% numbers to ruin a country. Sometimes moderate, persistent inflation does the job slowly and painfully. Case in point, America in the 1970s. In 1971, Nixon severed the last tie to gold. The dollar became pure fiat. The Fed could print without limit. And print they did to fund Vietnam, the Great Society programs, massive deficits. Inflation that had been tame for decades woke up. 1970, 5.7%. 1974, 11%. 1979, 11.3%. 1980 peak, 13.5%. For a full decade, average annual inflation was about 7.4%. Not hyperinflation, just relentless grinding erosion. What did that do to everyday Americans? Gas, 36 cents a gallon in 1970. 1.19 in 1980. Your commute tripled in cost. Milk, 1.15, 2.16. Ground beef, 66 cents lb, 1.77. A basic grocery basket nearly doubled while wages struggled to keep pace. But the real killer was for anyone relying on savings or fixed income. A retiree living comfortably on $500 a month in 1970 was scraping by or worse in 1980. That same $500 barely covered rent. Thousands of seniors had to go back to work in their 70s. Savers got crushed as interest rates lagged inflation. Only big debtors won. Fixed-rate mortgage holders watched their payments become trivial as nominal wages rose. It took Paul Volcker jacking rates to nearly 20% in 1982 and triggering a brutal recession, 10.8% unemployment, to finally slay the beast. The lesson? Even 7 to 10% sustained inflation over a decade cuts your purchasing power in half and devastates living standards for the middle and working class. Now let's look at a country that's been living with chronic inflation for 8 straight decades, Argentina. In 1913, Argentina was one of the 5 richest nations on earth per capita, richer than France or Germany, vast farmland, educated population, strong institutions. Then populism took hold. Juan Perón, elected in 1946, promised the world government jobs, massive subsidies, nationalized industries, wealth redistribution. He delivered, By printing money like mad. Inflation averaged 25-30% per year through the 1950s. Peron was ousted in 1955, but every government since kept the same playbook: spend, subsidize, print. They've never stopped. From 1945 to today, average annual inflation in Argentina is roughly 195%. Compound that, and the peso has lost over 99% of its value. They've had years over 3,000%, years at only 40%, but never ever zero. The result? A complete destruction of trust and long-term thinking. Argentines get paid and immediately convert to US dollars. They call it dollarization under the mattress. No one saves in pesos. Banks collapse regularly. 9 sovereign defaults since independence. People buy property, gold, anything real. Long-term planning is impossible. Why save for retirement when your money loses 50% a year? Why invest in a business when inflation devours profits? Argentina should be one of the wealthiest nations on the planet. Endless fertile land, oil, minerals, smart people. Instead, it's trapped in perpetual relative poverty because 8 decades of inflationist policy have poisoned everything. Finally, the fastest modern collapse of an advanced, resource-rich economy, Venezuela, 2016-2020. Venezuela sits on the largest proven oil reserves in the world. Over 300 billion barrels. Should be Dubai-level wealthy. Under Chavez and then Maduro, they went full socialist utopia. Free housing, free food, subsidized gasoline at 1 cent a gallon, government jobs for all. It worked great while oil was $100 per barrel. Revenue poured in. Then oil crashed to $30 in 2016. Instead of cutting the insane spending, they printed bolivars like crazy. Inflation? 800% in 2016, over 1,000% in 2017, an astronomical 65,000% plus in 2018, still thousands percent in 2019. 4 straight years of hyperinflation. A cup of coffee, 2 million bolivars. Dozen eggs, 6 million. People carried backpacks stuffed with cash. Prices changed hourly. The black market dollar rate exploded. The middle class vanished practically overnight. Professionals who had savings, decent jobs, and stability in 2014 were digging through garbage for food by 2018 to 2019. Average Venezuelan lost 24 pounds in body weight from hunger. Not because food couldn't be grown, but because the money was worthless, so farmers stopped producing for bolivars. By 2020, the bolivar was abandoned for everyday use. Everyone transacts in dollars now. Another currency murdered by printing. 5 examples. 5 total collapses. Same cause every time. Government spends beyond its means, prints money, currency dies, savers and workers get robbed. Society fractures. Now let's talk about you. America, January 2026. You think you're safe because we're not burning trillion-dollar notes for heat yet? You think the official 2.7% inflation number means things are under control? They're not. Let me show you what's actually happened to the average American household since the big money printing spree started in 2020, using real spending and income data. Pre-COVID, January 2020, median household income $7,500. Average annual consumer spending $61,300, about $508 a month. Fast forward to now, 2026, median household income has risen to roughly $84,000. That's about a 24% nominal increase over 6 years. But average household spending, it's exploded to over $77,000, $80,000 plus annually, depending on the exact data set, roughly $6,500, $6,800 monthly. That's a 30-40% increase in the cost of living in the same period. Your income went up 24%. Your expenses went up 35% plus. You're losing ground every single year, thousands of dollars. Take a typical family earning the 2026 median. Even after nominal raises, you're spending a bigger and bigger share of your paycheck just to maintain the same lifestyle. Savings rates are plummeting. Credit card debt has ballooned past $1.23 trillion nationally. Over 65% of Americans now live paycheck to paycheck. That's millions more families than just 5 years ago who have zero margin for error. And it is accelerating because the government is still running massive deficits, close to $1.8 trillion in FY 2025 alone. And the national debt is pushing $38-39 trillion. They're still monetizing it. The money printer never actually stopped. It just slowed down a bit while they hoped you'd forget. If we stay on this path with average 5 to 7% real inflation, which is what households are actually experiencing, not the cooked CPI books, you'll be deeper in debt, working longer hours, retiring later, if at all, just to tread water. This is deliberate. With $38+ trillion in debt, sustained inflation is the only way they can avoid default without massive spending cuts or tax hikes that would end political careers. Every percent of inflation shaves billions off the real burden of that debt, paid for by you, the holder of dollars, the lender to the government. They owe dollars that will be worth less and less. You're getting repaid in confetti. This is the greatest hidden theft in history, and it's happening right now, following the exact same playbook as Weimar, Zimbabwe, 1970s America, Argentina, and Venezuela. You can't vote your way out of the printing press. You can't stop them from debasing the currency to save themselves. But you can protect yourself and your family. Get out of cash and low-yield bonds as much as possible. Move into hard assets that cannot be printed. Real estate in productive areas, gold and silver, quality stocks, especially companies with strong pricing power, energy, commodities, defense, anything essential that people need no matter what. Understand this is structural, not cyclical. The debt is too big, they will keep inflating it away. We're looking at another decade minimum of 5 to 8% average inflation, maybe worse if things tip. Your purchasing power will be cut in half again by the mid-2030s, unless you own things that rise with or faster than inflation. This isn't doom porn. This isn't financial advice in the legal sense. This is history screaming at you through 5 blood-soaked examples that all ended the same way. The pattern is playing out again right now in the United States. You've been warned.